I'm going to talk about my genealogy journey, which primarily focuses around the Mullane and Columba surnames. All the research was done by me, so I'm going to go through firstly the outline of what I'm going to talk about, starting off with the background and origins of my family history, then followed on by the methods I use and the difficulties I faced with each of these methods. Then I'm going to go on to the details of my research, facts, figures, interesting finds and anecdotes, and finally I'm going to round it off with the benefits of the journey for me. So I'm just going to get started now with the background and origins of my family history, starting off with the meanings and origins of my surnames. So firstly with the Mullane surname, it originated in Munster, primarily in Cork. It can be found in Limerick, Clare and all over Munster, but it's primarily originated in Cork. It originated from the name O'Mullen, which also originated from the Munster area. This is one of the most interesting and I guess funny parts of my research was that my father thought our surname was of Viking descent, and breaking the news to him was one of the best parts of my research. So moving on to the Coleman name then, this was a name originally given to an Irish missionary. He's usually known as Saint Columba. He was born in about 540 AD, should I say, in 615 AD he died. He founded a monastery in northern Italy in 1614. There are some English roots to the name, however. The name in England comes from a burner of coal or a collector of coal, and the Gaelic translation for that is O Colmain, and it means descendant of Colman, the original missionary. So then I'm going to move on to my primary countries of origin, which firstly will be Ireland, coming from my paternal grandfather who lived, and his ancestors also lived in the Limerick and Cork area, followed by my paternal grandmother who also lived in the Limerick and Cork area, primarily Munster, and then finally with my maternal grandfather who also lived primarily in the Cork and Limerick area. However, my maternal grandmother was born in a small village in Germany called Düren. Düren is situated just west of Cologne, south of Dusseldorf and east of Aachen. So this is how my grandmother came to Ireland. Firstly, her siblings came over to Ireland as part of a program called Operation Shamrock. And Operation Shamrock was a program run by the Irish Red Cross in the aftermath of World War II, bringing roughly 500 children over to Ireland for respite after the war, to offer them some solace from the life of a war-torn country. My grandmother was not actually part of this program, but her two younger siblings were, and they ended up staying with my grandfather's family during this program for about 2 years. And over those 2 years they spent so much time talking about my grandmother and how they missed her and how they loved her, that after this was over, my grandfather's family invited my grandmother over to stay with them. Now this is a story that my grandfather told me that I'll never forget. The first day he met her, he said she was 13 years old, she had pigtails down her back, and himself and his brother were in jaundice. He knew he was going to get better because he had such a beautiful woman in his house. So that's something that I'm never going to forget. So that's how my grandmother came to Ireland and how I came to be. So now I'm going to talk about the methods I used and individually each difficulty I faced with each of these methods. So here's an outline of the methods that I used. Firstly, I used online research platforms. I also used oral testimony, document analysis, and then with this data that I found, I collated it all into one readable, shareable document. So firstly, I'm going to talk about my online research. So that was a hugely beneficial method for me. I used online platforms such as Ancestry, Roots Ireland, Irish Genealogy, Griffith's Valuation, and many, many more. To talk about each of these will just take the entire presentation. So I'm just going to talk about them in general. These online platforms had a huge amount of information. This was a huge benefit for me. Not only did they have birth certs, death certs, marriage certs, they also gave you access to other people's family trees, which you could then correlate your data with to make sure it was correct. Another big advantage of these was that they could be used from absolutely anywhere. I could work from home, the university itself, or the office, and each of these things made it so much more accessible and usable for me, and was one of the reasons that it was one of my primary research tools. However, there were some difficulties with online research. These websites could be faulty at times, and by faulty I don't mean that they didn't work. I mean that in some cases you could type in something that you know to be true and not get any results. The next day you could come back and type in the exact same thing and find what you were looking for in the first place. I don't know what the explanation is for this, but it's just something to be aware of it undertaking online research. They can be difficult to use at times. One particular website that I found difficult to use was irishgenealogy.ie. It was one that was extremely useful once I figured out how to use it, but was very difficult to the untrained eye, which I was at the beginning of this process. One of the biggest difficulties that I found was on these online platforms, while I also said it as an advantage, there's an overwhelming amount of information. It makes it difficult to narrow down your search. Speaking of narrowing down your search, some of these platforms don't offer you the chance to narrow down your search to a low enough level to be able to find your ancestor and to be ensured that it's correct. That's one of the biggest difficulties I found with this. So next I'm going to talk about oral testimony. Now this is an extremely helpful source for me, especially at the beginning of my research, because it pointed me in the right direction and showed me where I need to look and what I need to search. And without this, I don't think that my research would have been possible. So there were a couple other advantages. That there's information here that just can't be found anywhere else. It's like stories that wouldn't have been recorded on government documents or on professional documents. These stories that are true and are facts that you just would never have found if you didn't go to oral testimony. And that's one of the biggest advantages of this. It also creates family bonds. And these bonds are something that bring you closer to your family, because rather than talking about the weather or the news, you're talking about something meaningful that relates to your family only and that connects you on a deeper level than anyone outside of the family can understand. And that was something that was a big benefit for me of oral testimony. It also creates an interest in your research, not only for you by hearing these stories that humanizes your research, but also for your family, because by talking about this it gets other people interested in your research and in history in general, and that's something that's really positive about oral testimony. However, there are quite a few difficulties with oral testimony. One of the biggest one of those is that you'll be very aware of bias and incorrect information. Some people have been told stories for the entirety of their lives and they assume them as facts whether they are or not. So if you were swayed by their bias, you could be sent off in a completely wrong direction of what you're researching. However, there is another difficulty that I didn't expect at all, which is that some people you're interviewing don't know how much they actually do know. They have the information in their minds, but they just don't know they have it. So by asking a general question like, what do you know about our family history, you're not going to get much out of them, but by narrowing it down you'll get a little more. So that's one of the things I found that was really interesting. And one of the biggest difficulties, especially with older relatives, was the going off topics. It's great to hear these stories and it's excellent to hear them talk, but sometimes it's not good for research. So keeping on topic was one of the biggest difficulties for me. Another one would be the hurting the feelings of others. It's something that I wasn't very aware of. Hurting the feelings of others was something that I hadn't really thought about with research, but some of these issues are sensitive and difficult. So you have to be very aware of what you publish and what you write and what you tell others, and that's something that I didn't expect. Now I'm going to talk about document analysis. That was an extremely useful source to me, and something that really made me interested when I was researching, because it offers a human insight into these documents. A little later in the presentation I'm going to show some documents that I found relating to my family history and explain why they brought me closer. They're an extremely useful source, not only for understanding the people you're researching, but for understanding the world that they live in. But there were also some difficulties with document analysis. In some cases the documents just weren't there to be found, and that's especially true in the case of Irish documents, as we're a pretty new state in terms of things, and a lot of our documents were lost or not recorded or not digitized, and that's a very difficult process when you're looking for documents. Sometimes they can be difficult to read and interpret. A lot of these documents are handwritten, and in some cases in Latin. That makes reading and interpreting these extremely difficult. They're also hard to find when they do exist, because you have to know such specific information to find these documents in order to make sure they're correct. A final difficulty that I had with document analysis was the cost. A lot of these programs offer you these documents but only at an extra cost, and this was extremely difficult for me because, not being from a wealthy background, some of these documents were just not attainable because of the cost. So here's the documents that I was speaking of. Firstly, I have the census of 1901 from my great-grandfather John Manley, and it's a bit difficult to read on the screen. But it says up here that he was a car owner was his occupation, and down here his daughter Bridget Manley is currently going to school in 1901, and his wife is a housewife. This is a good look into society in 1901. As you see, women are not important in the workforce in 1901, and cars are slightly becoming important in the workforce, and we're getting there. However, in 1911, coming closer to World War I, 3 years prior, you can see things a little difficult to change. Now, one thing that I failed to mention in the other slide was that down the bottom right of the screen, you can see here the signature of my ancestor. And this offers me a little closeness to my ancestor by seeing his actual handwriting and being able to compare it to other members who are living at the moment in my family. This was extremely interesting. Now I want to point back to the occupations. Up here, he's a car salesman, and that just shows the increasing importance of cars in society. And finally, down the bottom, his daughter is now a seamstress. Now, a working woman in that is 3 years prior to the war, and they're becoming increasingly important in the workforce. And that's why I like these documents, because they not only offer you insight into your own family history, but into the society in which they live, in the world they live in. You gain a better understanding of where you really came from. Finally, the last method I want to talk about is the collation of all this data. I found was an extremely interesting and difficult method that I used. So the advantage of it are that it makes your research much easier to understand, because rather than having hundreds of documents, you have one easy to read and easy to share report. It also lessens the chance of losing this data. It makes it so much easier for you to find it and save it and keep it safe. Finally, it creates a document that is significantly easier to explain to others than all these reports. It's easy for me to email my report onto anybody in this room or anybody around the world, rather than having to photocopy hundreds of documents and send them on. It also makes it easier when you're trying to explain it to older relatives who do not have very many technical skills. You can print this out and show them to them and go through it step by step. And that's an extremely huge benefit of collating your data. However, there are some difficulties with collating the data, which firstly, it's extremely time consuming. It takes a lot of time to order these reports and put them into it and get everything correct and right. It's very time consuming and it's very tedious. It can get extremely boring and extremely difficult, but it's worth it in the end. I just want to go into a detailed view of my research now. Firstly, the facts and figures. Currently there's 191 members on my family tree, 104 men and 87 women. There's 50 different surnames, and they're originating from countries such as Germany, England, Canada, USA and the Netherlands. It goes back over 200 years, 8 generations from myself. Just some interesting finds that I discovered over the course of my research. Firstly, that my great-grandfather, who I knew was shot as a result of refusing to fight for Hitler in the war, we never knew where he was buried up until about last year, and I found the record of him being buried in Tallinn in Estonia in a mass grave, and that was something that we had never anticipated before. We never looked in Estonia. He was from Durn, in that village where I pointed out a little earlier, and that's where he was. Another anecdote, I guess, was that we discovered that one of my ancestors was a bishop, and he was obviously up to no good as I'm here today. But that's something, these kind of stories make it real and show that these people aren't just facts and figures on a computer screen or on a page. They're people who had lives and made mistakes, just as all of us do now. So that's what makes this research that bit more interesting than your regular research. Finally, I want to finish up with the benefits of the journey for me. First benefit for me was improving my research skills. And as an English and history student in the University of Limerick, research is a big aspect of my university life. And through the course of this, I learned to get through barriers or work around difficulties and work in a team for research. And all these things make my research skills so much better for when I do go back to university. After this research, I feel so much better equipped to succeed in research and to do the best I can in research. The next benefit that I found was I got a better understanding of where I came from. As I said, by using these documents and by looking up all these things, I got a better understanding of the lives that my ancestors lived and the difficulties that they faced. And that made me extremely grateful for where I am today in university with a good home and a happy family. Some of these people where my ancestors did not have this, and the lives that they lived led to me being able to have it now. That made me extremely grateful, and as I said, getting me a better understanding of where I came from. I also gained a newfound closeness to my family that I didn't expect. As I said earlier, instead of talking about the news or the weather or something absolutely meaningless, we were able to talk about something that connects us on a deeper level than anyone else. Seeing, especially older relatives, light up when they go down memory lane and talk about their family or tell these stories that they've never told anyone else before, is something really magical that I never expected in the course of this research, and it's something that I'll be forever grateful in the course of this research. That's my final point, and thanks for listening.